Good morning. Happy Sunday morning, the day after my 72nd birthday. I'd have to start off by saying thank you very much for all the kind words and the fun electronic cards and the fun real cards and the surprise gifts that were left on my front porch. Thank you all very much. This has been a very happy and memorable 72nd birthday, and Constance gave me all my favorite treats to eat and made my day just absolutely wonderful. And you all were a part of that, and thank you very much. How did you know it was my birthday? Anyway, we're on the next installment of Ask Baba Lon. Answers to Questions of Life and Magic, published by New Falcon Publications. And this is the second of two magazine interviews that I did 10 years ago. This one's 10 years ago. And I was interviewed by Star Foster. And Star, I think you're a Facebook friend. If you're on here today, here is your wonderful questions. And it was for pathos.com. And I'm sure all of us get a lot of notifications and wonderful articles from Pathos. Patheos, pathos.com. This was from the April 5th, 2010 edition or issue. And so here's Star Foster asked me this first question. With 15 books on magic and the occult, your duties in the O.T.O, your lectures and appearances as guest expert on TV and radio, you seem to stay busy. What projects are you currently working on? People love that question. Okay, here's my answer. I have a new book coming out in November from Llewellyn titled Low Magic. It's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. It's autobiographical and contains stories of magical operations I've done over the years. The title is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, facetiously using the term low magic to refer to any magical operation one actually performs, rather than those one just talks or argues about. I'm also finishing up a new book called Ask Baba Lon. I've been working on this one for over 20 years. It's a collection of letters I've received over the years from magicians and would-be magicians, and my answers back. Some are absurd and funny, but most are extremely good questions and observations that required me to really search my soul in order to discover what I really think about these matters. Star, you've been with the Ordo Templi Orientis for over 30 years and have served as its U.S. Deputy Grand Master since 1996. What initially drew you to the O.T.O, and what do you think is the most interesting aspect of the organization today? My answer. I didn't know it at the time, but there were only 5 or 6 members of the O.T.O surviving from Crowley's day, still living when I wrote my first letter of inquiry to the order back in 1973. I had read a couple things by Aleister Crowley and heard a lot of things, mostly bad, about him. But I just had the feeling that despite his bad reputation, this colorful character was really a holy man. As it turns out, the more I discovered about him, the greater is my conviction that this is true. In my opinion, the most interesting aspect of the organization today is the demonstrable success of its mission of perpetuating the works of Aleister Crowley and the propagation of Thelema as a bona fide spiritual philosophy. In addition to this, the O.T.O provides the very real magical experiences of its various degree initiation ceremonies, which I believe to be among Crowley's greatest magical rituals. Star Foster asks me, you're also an archbishop in the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. Can you tell us a little bit about the EGC and its relationship to the O.T.O? I get that question a lot. Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, EGC, is the ecclesiastical arm of the O.T.O. It's not a separate organization. It is not a separate spiritual entity. This puts us in a similar position as our traditional ancestors, the Knights Templar, who were a military secret society independent of king and church. They were answerable only to the Pope, who seldom questioned anything they did. And they had their own priests and their own confessors. In other words, like the O.T.O, they had their own church within the order. Get used to thinking of the O.T.O and the EGC as the exact same organization, viewed with different glasses. Put on your O.T.O glasses and you see the O.T.O with our Frater Superior, our Supreme and Holy King or Queen, our Sovereign Grand Inspectors General, our Most Wise Sovereigns, our Lodge Masters and members of the various degrees, some of whom have volunteered for extra duties. Put on your church glasses and look at the same thing and you see the EGC with our Sovereign Patriarch or Matriarch, our presiding bishops, our priestesses, priests, and deacons. Then Star asks me, most people don't think of magical disciplines as spirituality. Is there a difference between a magical discipline and a spiritual discipline? My answer, I guess it depends entirely on the attitude, motive, and intent of the individual practitioner. It's quite possible, in my opinion, to be a perfectly effective magician without subscribing to any particular discipline that most people usually consider as being spiritual. Then Star asks me, you were on a pagan panel at PantheaCon recently. Many pagans are interested in the O.T.O, especially through the writings of Crowley and yourself, although the O.T.O itself isn't specifically pagan. How would you characterize the relationship of the O.T.O and the pagan community? Do you consider yourself a pagan? My answer, it of course comes down to your accepted definition of the word pagan. If by the term you mean rustic or a country person, I'm not a pagan. If by the term you mean a person that reveres or worships a deity or pantheon of deities other than those that or those worshipped by the Abrahamic religions, then my answer is a qualified yes. However, if you're asking if I'm a person who worships the earth as the supreme goddess and attempts to synchronize my entire spiritual focus upon the rhythms of the year and its cycles of agriculture and husbandry, my answer is an unqualified no. I don't worship the pagan goddess of nourishment as of 2 aeons ago. I don't worship the Chrysalmu, that's Christian, Muslim, or Jew. I don't worship the Chrysalmu dying god of sacrifice and superstition of the last aeon. If anything, I worship the child that represents the formula of the present aeon. And I attempt to synchronize my spiritual focus on the formula of natural growth. If that makes me a pagan, then I'm a pagan. Star asks, can someone be active in the O.T.O without being a member of the Thelemic religion? Are all faiths welcome? My answer. The O.T.O requires only that an individual be able to say in good conscience that he or she accepts the book of the law without wishing to make changes in it. And the book of the law is the primary holy book of Thelema, dedicated to Crowley by a Praetor Human Intelligence in 1904. As no one may presume to interpret the book of the law for another, this puts the responsibility for one's understanding of the text squarely on one's own lap. If an individual believes that his or her religious beliefs can be compatible with his or her understanding, or even indifference as to the meaning of the book of the law, then there is no other litmus test other than that applied by the individual. That being said, there are many O.T.O members who consider themselves pagan. There are also quite a few who consider themselves Jews. One of my dearest O.T.O brothers is a Muslim. There are even those who consider themselves Christian, although by most Christian doctrinal standards, they'd be considered highly irregular or even heretical Christians. There are quite a few who are comfortable with identifying themselves as atheists, and a growing number who are Freemasons, who are vocally not atheists. Star asks another question. Much of ceremonial magic draws from Judeo-Christian traditions. For some pagans, that's uncomfortable territory. Why should a pagan work with angels or study Jewish mysticism? Isn't that a great question? My answer is they shouldn't feel the need to. They shouldn't feel the need to if they are comfortable with their mastery of the rites and traditions of their pagan religion. Question. The O.T.O has been associated with sex magic, and you have written 3 books on the subject. What would you like to say to people who are interested in ceremonial magic and the O.T.O, but find the subject of sex magic uncomfortable or off-putting? This is my very frank answer. If after reading what I've written about the subject, someone is still disturbed by a discussion of the most universal or even metaphoric aspects of sex, then I must respectfully conclude that he or she has important psychological issues that should be addressed before becoming involved in any form of esoteric study undertaken by adults. Okay, question. But how do you really feel, Lon? Question. Your acclaimed book on practical Kabbalism for the magical community, The Chicken Kabbalah of Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford, a dilettante's guide to what you do and do not need to know to become a Kabbalist, thanks for the plug, Star, is written in the voice of an imaginary rabbi. Why did you choose to write as a humorous fictional character? My answer. Because Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford could say things that I would be hesitant to say. It's like the shy ventriloquist who can only really speak his heart through the wooden lips of his dummy. Question. Your autobiography, My Life with the Spirits, is required reading for 2 classes at DePaul University in Chicago. Can you tell us about that? My answer. It's a class on modern religion. A few years ago when I was in Chicago, I even got to address the class. Question. Magical authorities like Crowley have traditionally been seen as self-aggrandizing and egotistical, and magical texts as obscure and ciphered. Your autobiography and books on magic tend to be funny and down to earth. Is humor and accessibility necessary to reach a modern audience? My answer, probably not for everybody. It's how I see things, and it's how I attempt to communicate. Question. Do you think information on magical and spiritual matters can be too readily available? My lengthy answer is no. Question. Aleister Crowley, undisputed as a talented occultist, delighted in his nefarious reputation, and claimed to have lived quite a wild life. You've written several books on Crowley's work. Do you have an opinion on the man himself? Was he as wicked as he made himself out to be? Answer. He didn't just claim to have a wild life. He had a wild life. No wilder perhaps than Ramakrishna or Oscar Wilde or Timothy Leary, however. Let me ask you this. Have you ever met and tried to have a friendship or a business relationship with a great artist, a famous novelist or a filmmaker or actor or dancer or choreographer, composer, virtuosic magician or singer or poet or painter or sculptor, who is also a bona fide genius? It may start out pleasant enough, but more often than not, the more you become enmeshed in their mad world, the more your world is turned upside down. It's not always the case, but many times these people can be almost dangerously unstable. They can be real jerks. Cruel and sarcastic prima donnas who focus so much on their art that they can be completely oblivious to the feelings, well-being, or even the safety of those around them. They're filled with shortcomings and character flaws and hang-ups because they just never had a normal life to work these issues out, and frankly, they don't care. Their art is the magical object of the operation that is their lives. Not you, not the press, not even history. Crowley, I believe, was such a person. There are aspects of his life that I applaud, that awe me, that touch me in ways that can only inspired spiritual literature can do. Then there are examples of the man being petty and cruel. Frankly, I don't think I would have long been comfortable in his presence. His wickedness was no more wicked than the shortcomings of any artist genius. The difference is that Crowley's wickedness was part of his art. Question. Your autobiography, My Life with the Spirits, contains a few cautionary tales of your early days of practicing magic. What advice would you give someone beginning a magical discipline? Don't be afraid. It's good to be wise, it's good to be cautious, but it's never good to be afraid. Never. If you make a mistake, big deal. You'll live through it, most likely. It's better to do something and make a mistake than to not do something because you're afraid of making mistakes. Question. You've written a lot about classical magical systems. What do you think of chaos magic? Answer. I think if I were a youngster starting my study of magic, it would be a very attractive introduction to the art. Question. What do you think has been the most important contribution to ceremonial magic in the last 50 years? My answer? The personal computer, the internet, and quantum physics. Question. What do you think the future holds for ceremonial magic? A longer past. I don't like predicting things. Question. Looking back on your life, what reward, if any, have your years of magical practice and study given you? Answer. This might seem too simple and corny, but my biggest reward has been a certain success in achieving a measure of what I presumptuously will call enlightened happiness. Maybe it's all been merely a matter of good luck, but who knows for sure what luck really is? Question. Many of our readers may not know you're also a musician. You're a country rock band from the early 70s. Charlie D and Milo is being rediscovered by a new generation, and you've been busy independently recording original folk songs. Any plans to release or re-release any of your music as CDs or EP? Answer. I'm so glad you asked. Yes, before I wrote books, I wrote songs, and for a while made a pretty good living at it. I gave music and recording a rest for 25 years, but I've picked it up again in the last couple of years. Maybe it's just my fourth or fifth midlife crisis. In the last couple of years, I've again been lucky enough to play some local clubs in the LA area and to book concerts in the US, Japan, and Australia. Even back in the 70s, my music was magical in nature. Charlie and I called it acid cowboy. And I recently made a couple of CDs, just me and my guitar, of my songs of sloppy sentiment, offensive blasphemy, and diabolic Americana. And I go on to plug two little albums that I did myself called the White Album and the Black Album. And I give the publishing information. Remember, I'm not asking anyone to listen to these CDs, but I would appreciate it if you bought them. But my later CDs, which were a redo of many of those songs, are currently available just everywhere. And yes, please buy them. You don't have to listen to them. The last question. Possibly your most remarkable magical act is being married to your lovely wife, Constance, for over 40 years. Any secrets to successful matrimony you'd like to share? It's now been 52 years. Here's my answer. Try not to get to know each other very well. Communication is way overrated, and mystery remains an aphrodisiac. And that's the end of that interview. Tomorrow will be the third and final of the interview section, and it was for the magazine Abra, Had, Opera, a German Abra, a German magazine. So I hope you'll be with me tomorrow for that. And again, thank you everyone for the wonderful birthday wishes and the kind vibes. I could feel them across the aethers. So until tomorrow, be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Bye-bye.